Street photography is defined as a genre of photography that features subjects in candid situations within public places. It does not necessitate the presence of a street or even the urban environment. Street can simply refer to a place where human activity can be seen, a place to observe and capture social interactions. The subject can even be absent of any people and can be that of object or environment, where an object projects a human character or an environment is decidedly human. Pictured here are examples of street photography from Robert Frank, Helen Levitt, and various other street photographers. Street photography is renowned for creating art from the ordinary. Street photographers generally use a variety of techniques to emphasize the scene over their subjects. Some of these techniques include using wide-angled lenses, tilted horizons, and candid photography. By including more of the scene, wide-angled lenses allow for subjects to be contextualized in their surroundings. Meanwhile, candid photography is particularly important because the beauty of street photography resides in the focus on the scene as compared to the subjects. When photography is staged, it becomes focused on commentary, sending the message of the photographer to the viewer. Street photography isn't about creating a message, but rather conveying reality's message to the consumer. In this way, a street photographer is the medium rather than the creator of the messages carried in their photography. However, if street photography is supposed to be candid photography of ordinary events, is it then possible to take so-called street photography at staged events? To examine the intersection between street photography and staged political events, we will look at the case study of Jeremy Mann. Considered an era-defining 1960s photographer, Winogrand helped to define street photography. Famous for his tilted horizon and wide-angled lens, Winogrand served as an example for street photographers for years to come. As other street photographers discovered the artistic potential of the slanted photograph, it began to gain traction in their community. One explanation for the prevalence of the tilted horizon is that photographers of the time favored it because it blinds the viewer to the distortion of the wide-angled lens. However, modern street photographers, whose camera equipment can take wide-angled lens shots without distorting its edges, still tilt the horizons of their photographs. So there must be some artistic value, as well as a practical value, to the technique. One explanation, offered by Clive Scott, explains that street photography is meant to show something ordinary in a new and interesting way. If a photograph was framed upright, the focus of the photograph is its subject. One's eyes are drawn to the middle of the picture, and there is an immediate focus. A tilted photograph has no natural focus. Instead, the viewer is forced to take in the scene as a whole and is impacted by the photograph instead of the subject being photographed. After establishing himself as a major player in street photography during the 1960s, Winogrand took a keen interest in staged political and media events. Winogrand was particularly interested in the irony of an event that sole significance was that the media was there to cover it. If there were no media, the press events would be absolutely worthless. Thus, the event that was created for the media is only validated by the media's attendance. Winogrand explored this irony in his 1974 collection of photographs, Public Relations. Different from most photographers in attendance, Winogrand was not seeking to take documentary photographs, but rather bring his unique street photography techniques into a normally documentary setting. What then sets Winogrand's photos apart from a more traditional documentary photograph of the same type of media events? In contrast, here are a few photographs taken by documentary photographers at similar events. To test how street photography can survive in a stage setting, I created a survey that showed street photographs of political events and compared them to more typical documentary photographs of similar events. I asked participants of the survey to look at the photographs and decide whether they thought the photograph was a street or a documentary shot. For the survey, participants generally voted that pictures with a famous person inside of it did not closely resemble street photography, whereas photographs with a more vague focus were deemed to closely resemble it. One participant explained what differentiated the types of photographs was the emphasis on larger crowds in open spaces as opposed to profile shots of important people. The street photographs generally drew their power from the situation rather than the subject. Now let's apply this analysis to two photographs of Muhammad Ali included in the survey. One, taken by Ali's personal photographer, features Ali close up with a fist up and a microphone in front of his face. The other, taken by Gary Winogrand, features Ali off-center and off-focus in the left side of the photograph, surrounded by very ordinary-looking reporters. Survey respondents did surprisingly well in determining that the former photograph was a documentary shot, while the latter was a street shot. I believe this can be explained by what stands out as the major features of Winogrand's works. Winogrand always portrays a scene, something happening, people doing things, showing genuine emotion, being surrounded by a full context. Meanwhile, documentary photographers don't need to contextualize their subjects. They do not photograph for the scene, but rather for the subjects. In the first Ali photograph, the picture portrays Ali as a superstar in front of a microphone with no other context. In Winogrand's photo, Ali is just a cog in a media circus machine. The media is surrounding him, devouring him, and he is not elevated higher than his surroundings. In this way, Winogrand's public relations photos reveal the ordinary nature of media events. Winogrand exposes the human nature and inherent posturing of media events simply by allowing us to view them in full context. Winogrand's work in public relations was a transitional piece for street photography. Winogrand showed that street photography need not be confined to a literal street, but could be transformed and transposed into many other mediums. By maintaining an emphasis on the scene over the subjects, and on interaction over profiles, Winogrand allowed for street photography to enter the arena of staged media events. As a result, he widened the scope of street photography for years to come, and has inspired generations of photographers to test its boundaries.
She only walks to count her steps. 18 strides and she stops to abide by the law that she herself has set. That 18 steps is one complete set, and before the next 9 right and 9 left, she looks up at the blue.